Meeting is called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just a reminder to anyone joining us via Zoom, we're providing that as a convenience for folks. We can't guarantee the stability of that connection, but if it should fail, the proceedings in their entirety will be available on CATV in a day or two. One other thing I just wanted to comment. We still have a mask mandate in the district, and that applies to the board meetings and other public meetings as well. So I just remind everyone to please try to keep your masks in place up over your nose and mouth. If you need a break, just walk out, please. Okay, we will have public comment during this meeting, and it will be, as always, governed by policy BEDH. Time is limited to 3 minutes, and people need to identify themselves by name and by the ward in which they reside. Additions or deletions from the agenda?
None.
Is there any public comment? Either in person or via Zoom. Via Zoom, you'll need to raise your hand or somehow
I
indicate.
don't see anyone raising their hand on Zoom.
Okay, no hands raised on Zoom, no one in the room. Public comment period is closed. Correspondence. Madam Secretary, is there any correspondence?
There was just one regarding the use of masks at meetings.
Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes from the last board meeting, January 26th.
January 20th. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the January 26th, 2022 board meeting.
Motion by MJ,
I'll second.
second by Lillian. Are there any corrections?
Yeah, I think we had one.
MJ?
So just under the motion to adjourn, it should be 8-0 because by that point, Stephen had left the meeting.
Okay.
And then along those same lines, so because
Lil,
we're-
could you put your mic a little bit closer? Thanks.
Sorry. Along those same lines, because we're keeping the agenda in order of it was written, but not in order of when we covered it, it says under 8A that at this point, Stephen is no longer in attendance, but he is in attendance later because we moved the agenda items forward that he was going to vote on.
Right.
So it's just confusing because it looks like he's not in attendance as far as the order on this paper goes. And then he appears for votes later on.
Mysterious.
But she covered it in number 3. So she
Did
does
she?
say it in number 3 that she addresses why she did that or how she did it.
Where?
Number 3, she says that we moved
I see.
items 9A and B will be moved immediately after the student report. So she tells you that they took place after the student report.
Okay. I think probably it would be worthwhile to move that one sentence, Stephen Cantor no longer in attendance, to the appropriate place. Where would that appropriate place be, Stephen? Do you remember?
Probably left right after the discussion on the warrant articles.
I mean, it is in the right place in the sense that that is when he wasn't there, but because.
Oh, it
9
was the discussion itself that's.
Right, because
yeah.
9A and 9B were moved to a head. So it's just confusing. It's just confusing. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured she did that because of the last time we talked about the order. So I thought she made it a point to address it here, which is why
So maybe we
I
just,
followed it because of the way she did that.
maybe we just need a sentence at 3 where in addition to items 9A and 9B will be moved to be like Stephen Cantor was present for that discussion for 9A.
Wouldn't
and
you see that by the vote? Wouldn't you know that he was there because of the vote?
It's just, I mean, like, Yeah, but it's confusing. Just trying to clarify. I think.
Okay. Okay, so can we just let that be a point of ambiguity, or is there a convenient way to fix it?
I mean-
It might be easier that way.
Yeah, I think it might.
Yeah, I
be
mean,
too,
certainly
Stephen.
easier to be
Okay.
ambiguous, sure.
Okay, is there anything else? MJ?
Yeah, one thing I just noticed too was that in the beginning, we started saying who made the motion by the first and last name, and then starting around number 8, I think we just went to first name. So I guess it might be nice to have the last names in there too.
Yeah, I think going forward, I don't think we need to correct it here, but going forward, Megan, if you could use first and last name for people making motions and making statements, that would be useful.
And I appreciate whoever went through and corrected how to spell my name for every single one. Good job.
Did you just get that message from someone who can't get into Zoom?
No.
Hold on, everyone.
There are people on Zoom, so
Said I attempted to join the meeting remotely, but it did not allow me to make comments or to raise my hand. Huh,
is there a person's name?
yeah. Amelia.
Hand was raised after public comment was closed. And it's right there. Her hand is still raised. The public comment is closed.
Is there, just in the interest of fairness, let's
Yeah.
let her have it. Does, we have a member of the public who wanted to make a comment during public comment, and evidently the hand raised icon didn't appear until I had closed that portion of the meeting. Is there any objection to reopening public comment for the purpose of hearing this one comment?
Nope.
Nope.
Hearing none, let's do that then.
Amelia, you'll need to unmute, please.
Thank you. This is the first time I've been able to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
This is the first time I've had the option to unmute. I don't know what, anyhow, here I am. So I've been thinking a lot about the so-called resource officer, and a couple of thoughts. I hope some of you have had a chance to watch the long podcast that helped change my thinking about this, and that I forwarded you the link to which sometime before. A couple of the issues that you might think about are boundaries, which are important issues to everybody, and educators should be very interested in clean boundary. And you know that the school system is separate from the city's municipal system. Not only separate, but it is run by a separately elected board, and it is funded separately, and it even has a different fiscal year to make it really unavoidably separate. And the school resource officer blurs those boundaries, which is really important. The second is that guns make it more likely that there will be gun violence. And the third issue is that a social worker is better able to do social work than even an officer who might have some training in social work. I've made these points before, but I have no evidence that the board has really appreciated this. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you, Amelia. Okay, the public comment part 2 is now closed. Okay, so did we, I really did that in the middle of the motion, didn't
We
I?
need to vote.
I apologize, everyone. Were there any other corrections to the minutes? Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor of accepting the minutes, public minutes?
And you just made Megan's job a whole lot harder, just so you know.
I know, Megan, I'm sorry. 9-0. 8-0. Stephen, you're abstaining?
No, Aaron.
Oh, Aaron. 8-0. We have 8 members present tonight. We need a motion to accept the non-public minutes from the same day.
Make a motion to accept the non-public minutes from January 26, 2022.
Moved by MJ,
I'll second.
second by Lillian. Any comments or questions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? It's 7-0-1. Are there any nominations or resignations?
None?
Student report. Miles, you're on.
My name is Miles Sturgis, and I'm the moderator of the council. An update on student life, is that students are continuing to enjoy the expanded band policy for winter athletics. And students definitely enjoyed having a real snow day this year, and students are also excited for February break. Something from council is I want to talk about the equity audit. Council is appreciative and supportive of the equity audit that the school district is conducting. However, at the high school, we took the equity audit 2 Fridays ago, but council would like to caution the board in the interpretation and analysis of the results. And while there will certainly be some good data provided by the survey, there are some downfalls to the survey that council believes could skew the results to not be fully representative of the students who completed the equity audit. Many questions were worded in such a way that students were confused on what the question was asking or how to properly answer the question. Meaning some students selected an answer that, if the question had been better worded, they don't actually agree with. Secondly, many answer choices did not make complete sense in the sense of the question being asked. And for those who don't know, council met with Deo and Dr. Roberts earlier in the school year to go over a preliminary draft of questions for the audit. Many suggestions were made, and not all suggestions were seen in the final draft. One such suggestion was the lack of in the audit, there is a lack of a neutral option for many questions that were asking whether students agreed or disagreed.
Mhm.
And in the audit, there was not a neutral option present. We noted this during our meeting with Deo, and we were informed that it was intentional, but the lack of a neutral option leaves some students having to answer agree or disagree when truly they are neutral on that question. Another suggestion, one which council officially approved a statement in support of, is that of including sexual orientation on the equity audit as a diversity factor. After council passed this statement, I sent it to Dr. Roberts and Theo Moano, and we were assured that sexual orientation would be included. And there were questions on the audit that did include sexual orientation, but not all questions where it would have made sense included sexual orientation. Such as the question, please select the areas you see diversity traits in the teachers and staff at your school. Select multiple boxes if applicable. Sexual orientation was not included as an answer choice for this question. I want to note for all the questions that I'm referencing specifically, since I no longer have access to the survey that was sent to us students specifically to take, I'm referring to the copy made available to parents prior to students taking the equity audit, where parents were allowed to opt in. So that's where I'm referencing these questions from. Sexual orientation not being included leaves out the diversity trait of sexual orientation in addition to other members who identify within the LGBTQ+. Also, transgender and intersex were listed as an example of sexuality when they are in fact gender identities, which is another factor that was included on the equity audit, but transgender and intersex were listed as an example of sexuality, which they are not. Transgender also, when it was listed as an example of sexuality, was notated as transgendered instead of transgender. Transgender is not appropriate language and is not modernly acceptable. In a Vox article, transgendered was equated to calling someone who was black. This lack of accurate language is confusing, inappropriate, offensive, and causes wonder as to how this made its way into the equity audit. Additionally, there were questions where only one answer choice was able to be selected, where multiple should be possible, such as the question, what is standing in your way of your learning success in a subject you are struggling with? This question only allowed one answer selection, limiting the accuracy of all the reasons students may struggle with learning success in a subject. Some questions simply didn't make sense, such as the question, and the everyday power struggles between students, teachers, parents, school board members, principal, and superintendent, who has more power at this time. First of all, this question implies that there is everyday power struggles, or at least that everyone.
We agree with you, Miles. Yes, we agree.
Additionally, the person with the most power will be those who are highest up, such as principal, superintendent, and school board members. These are only some examples of questions that had issues. It's not all of the questions that were either confusing or lacking correct answer choices. And council spent a lot of time working with DAOs to improve the equity audit, so not seeing some suggestions present and seeing the equity audit as it was administered is disappointing and frustrating for council. In conclusion, council supports that the district conducted an equity audit, but due to some lack of clarity in questions and poor choice of answer choices, council would like to caution the board and their analysis of the results.
Please let council know that I greatly appreciate that feedback. I will make sure that Deo listens to this part of Zoom. We, as a leadership team, had many conversations and we had a lot of communications with different subgroups. And I think that what you're representing is very helpful. And just please know that I take it seriously and I will share that information and hope that it's a way to learn and to improve. And I really appreciated the time and effort the students put into meeting with us and taking it. And, I apologize. I certainly would never want to offend anyone. And I really appreciate you bringing this information to our attention. Thank you so much.
Send that in documents.
What I just said?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Yeah. Would I send that to?
Yeah, and Megan is listening via a Zoom, the minute taker, and so she can play this back and capture what you're saying as well.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
send it to you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, on behalf of the board, also, Miles, we appreciate the amount of time that it took to go through the audit and identify all these problems. And when it's time to digest the results, we'll certainly keep in mind any design flaws that you point out. And thank you for that.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Miles? Comments? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to new business. We have Senator Sue Prentiss with us tonight via Zoom. She's on the New Hampshire Senate Education Committee. And she graciously accepted our invitation to join us tonight to talk about legislation, which is percolating through the House and the Senate. And I'm sure she also can take questions and comment on things that items that may have already passed or that may be looming on the horizon. So I thought, does Sue have control of
Yeah,
the?
so Sue, thank you for joining us. I made you host just
Thank
in
you for-
case you needed to do anything. And then at the end, if you could just return the host baton back to me, that would be fantastic.
Happy to do it. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you. I actually was going to come. I was going to come and be with you all in person, but I got tied up because we had an executive session for Senate Education that ran over this afternoon. And I just decided to stay in Concord. And then after I met with you all by Zoom, drive home. So another time, I will certainly join you all in person. First, before I have a few items certainly I want to report on. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. I'm really interested to hear what's of interest to the Lebanon School Board. But before I get started, I wanted to, I was listening very intently to Miles's report on the equity audit. And I wanted to thank him for the report and all the hard work that's been done. I also wanted to share with Miles and everyone there. I don't know if you remember my daughter, Phoebe Lowe. She was a student rep to the school board. And I think that was in 2015. And Phoebe graduated from St. Michael's College in 2019. She lives in Falls Church, Virginia now. and she'll be getting married on May 13th of 2023.
Congratulations.
So she's, there's a long line of, I think you've had some, strong, I think the student rep role is so important. And I so appreciate that voice in your, working with you and in all of our presences. So as Dick so kindly said, I'm your state senator. I'm so proud to be from Lebanon and serving in the Senate. This is, this is my second year on Senate Education. I'm also on executive departments and administration. And for folks that don't know, I have a background in, not just public safety, but working in state government. I was one of your longtime, I was actually Dick's city councilor over in Ward 1 and had a 2 terms as mayor. So I try to approach my role as best I can every day here through the lens of local officials. And in fact, today we had a pretty heated discussion about local control at school boards, talking about actually public comment. Not all school boards in this state offer opportunities for public comment or comment during the agenda when there are items that the public may want to speak to. So that was really interesting to me, guys, and just reinforced for me what a great community Lebanon is and the way that as elected officials, you all do your job. So in Senate Education, just looking at the legislature in general, school funding, the language of divisive concepts, remote learning, and actually a new bill on pre-K, some pre-K funding through the federal government are just some of the items that we have been working on and will continue to work on. When we talk about school funding, really a lot of the discussions around this right now aren't about how to fix, basically how to do what the state Supreme Court has asked us to do twice, but will ask us to do a third time. We're talking about education freedom accounts, and that was passed last year, a school voucher program, I'm sure you're aware, passed through as part of the budget. So we've tried to apply some transparency to the process, asking for the same types of reports that we get from our public schools, since public dollars are going there, as well as there's been an attempt to repeal that, and it was in our executive session today. And what I have to say is, although we were not successful, I'm really trying hard to shift the conversation back to, I think, these 1,800 children who are taking advantage of the voucher programs and their families. That program is set up and it's moving forward. We're spending a lot of time talking about that, where there are thousands and thousands of other children and families in New Hampshire and even in our own community that have their own set of issues. And I think we have to just step back for a minute and look at, all of, this isn't about a certain, this group of children who are, that they're saying we're throwing out, we want to throw out of their educational opportunities because we're trying to draw back on a voucher program. My perspective on it, and I've made it very clear on the record, is that it really has to do with fair and equitable access to education across the state. So I feel like, I'm looking at what the underlying problem is, and that as we continue to talk about these other pieces, we're stepping ourselves away from really focusing on what that issue is. So I used my time today in these discussions to try to push us back in that direction and be mindful that there are thousands of school children in the state of New Hampshire, and that our responsibility is to all of them. So including those who are using the voucher program. So I just wanted to share that with you. There was a bill, and it passed the Senate last week. That's an extraordinary grant relief fund. It was set up by Senator Erin Hennessy out of District 1. And although it doesn't impact Lebanon, what it did was measure free and reduced breakfast and lunch rates. It looked at a certain percentage of those and said, okay, here are communities that may need more assistance than others, and directed funding to those communities. Lebanon, out of 9 communities in District 5, 4 of them would receive funding if this ultimately passed the Senate. I'll be clear that I voted in favor of that because I thought that although I would like all communities treated the same, I didn't want to turn money away from other communities at this particular juncture. So it has to make it through finance and it has to make it through the House. But that's one bill related to funding that we've been talking about and have passed it. So there is another bill, Senate Bill 298, sponsored by Senator David Waters out of the Seacoast, and that is attempting to repeal what we all know as, say, the divisive concepts language from, that was also passed in the budget, trying to pull that out of the out-of-state law. I think we all know what that's about, and I've never really talked about it. I've heard from some of the school board members, and I've certainly heard from many families in Lebanon. I mean, my concern, and I remember speaking to this on the Senate floor, I brought in a newspaper and the Valley News, and it had an article on the front page about gender equity in pay in the athletic department at Dartmouth College. And I held that up and said, so if I was a school teacher and I was in Lebanon or in Hanover or anywhere in the state, and I wanted to talk about this article because there's a pay equity issue that the college is looking at and addressing, would I be in violation of this law? And I share that story with you because I think we all know how vague it is and how it really puts our teachers in a place where they're unable to talk about the inequities in history. And we know that history is what informs us and teaches us about the future. And so I have worked as best I can against that, to push that so that our teachers can do their jobs and that students are hearing all about what's happened in history, and so that they are fully and fairly and accurately informed. So although we're trying to repeal that, it has an uphill battle. There is a House bill I'm sure you've all heard of, which is the loyalty oath bill. It's still in the House. It hasn't made over to the Senate, and I don't know if it will, but it's made national TV and people are talking about this particular bill all over the country. So I feel all the time like there are attacks on local government and there are attacks on those that are, working in the classroom and in our schools. Let's talk about remote learning. I'll talk about remote learning and then pre-K, and then I'll wrap it up. And I'd certainly love to, if there's any questions, I'm happy to, to take them. So there was a bill today, and I think we all know that. I'm going to back myself up and say that I think, the preference is to be in the classroom with our children or with our teenagers, our students. That remote learning was not preferential, but in order in a global pandemic to do our jobs, that's what needed to happen. As we're moving back to where we are and trying to preserve the safety for staff and for teachers and for our students, whatever grade they're in, we still have to be mindful that this virus is not completely out of our communities. And that's why I see you all with masks. I'm in my office, I'm the only one here, so I don't have a mask on, but we're still thinking about public health every day in the schools. So the ability to use remote teaching as an option, not a mandate, not the first go-to, is looking to be, you may already know this, stripped out of, or the State Board of Education has said, if you go remote and it's not the request of the family, then you will, those days, if a school wants to do it, school district, whoever makes the decision, then you will have to add the days that you took remote onto the end of the school year. So we tried to pass a bill that would enshrine the remote option as just one of the tools, should it need to be used with, supporting families, supporting educators, and keeping this as a tool that's available to you without penalizing children and faculty by keeping them, adding on days at the end of the year. That's been considerably contentious, and we all recognize that there can and there are learning loss issues, and that the best places for the kids to be at all ages are in school. But I wanted to preserve that as an option and not penalize the school systems. And although this has not gone to the full Senate yet, it passed the Senate Education Committee today, 3-2. So one other bill that you might be interested in, and it was just introduced yesterday, is Senate Bill 453, which would bring funding, some federal dollars into communities for pre-K. So this is still, Senator Sherman from Rye introduced this. So I've just started reviewing it as of yesterday, but it doesn't depend on local or state funding. It would actually bring some federal funding in to run these programs in communities that wanted to do this. And there are different ways to get this done. So I'm talking to Senator Sherman. We're having our public hearing, and I'd be happy to tell you more about it as it rolls out if it actually makes it through the Senate. So those are just some of the things that are happening. I think it's important to note, let's see, we have this term, 21 bills in Senate Education. We're probably halfway through hearing bills. We're not halfway through preparing them for committee votes. We've only had 2 session days so far this year. So we still have a lot of work ahead of us and other bites at the apple. So I'm going to stop at that, and thank you again for the opportunity I look forward to being in person, but to be able to last minute to pitch in remote. Okay.
Thanks, Sue. Does anyone have questions for Senator Prentiss? Bill?
I have a question, and it's sort of a testing the waters question. Hi, and you're over there, but I'm over here.
I know. I could.
How much movement do you see being possible on changing the divisive concepts language?
Not as much as I would like. I want to. So it's just been introduced in the Senate. It already is being heard. It's actually been heard in the Senate. It's being heard in the House. It's unfortunate that we don't have the numbers. So it's a 14-10. It's 14-10, and we would have to be able to bring, we'd have to be able to basically flip that. So, we need to, and I'm not optimistic, sadly. I mean, I think that it's important and we have to continue to talk about it. I think it's really unfairly constructed in terms of how it really attacks the educators, and it pits the educators, puts them in a really bad position. But I think it's unfair to the students that their educators are feeling and know that there's a possibility that they could face, a civil rights complaint, a human rights complaint, and a violation and potentially a penalty. So I'd love to say that I think that we can change this. I think maybe there's more hope of seeing the House loyalty oath bill stay in the House, but in terms of actually repealing that language, I don't think this session, so this 2-year period, we'll be able to do it. I'm just being honest, and if something changes, we'll continue to fight for educators and fight for, teaching, history and about inequities and why that's important. But I don't think we have the votes, to be frank.
Thank you.
You're
I guess
welcome.
I had a sort of follow-up question
Sure.
to that, but more general. What would you say would be the best form of advocacy that we as school board members can do? Is it writing letters? Is it testifying? What would you recommend?
So what we know is that, I'm a Democrat. I'm just going to be partisan here because I think that this is part of the conversation in terms of a strategy to hear is that, I'm a Democrat, I caucus with the Democrats, and we have our position on this, and it's pretty clear. I think who we have to convince are Republicans who are we need to convince the majority and try to pull some key members of the majority over. So in your conversations, you already have me, okay? And you can look and see who's voted in your favor and who's supporting this bill. And actually, I'm a co-sponsor of the Senate bill. I would approach the folks that are in the majority and talk to them. And email is effective. We get so many emails. But the thing, what doesn't happen with few exception is my phone doesn't ring. I get a lot of emails. Okay. But the phone, I have my cell phone number is published all over the United States. Feel free to call me anytime. But a lot of these senators, they have, they're in their offices like mine now, and they have somebody who's answering their phone or they're doing it directly. I would call or I would use postcards. And if you can mail to a home address. Not everybody publishes their home address. I think that's really effective too. But you've got to try to find somebody. We need to get 4. We need to get 5 people. We need to pull them in, and I would just look at the majority and pick some people who are a little less a little more moderate. Okay, that's just, I know it sounds strategic and partisan, and I apologize for that, but that's the truth. You've got us. You need to talk to the others.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Anything else you'd like Sue to address? Kristen?
Sorry, very quick follow-up, kind of like Lil. Is there any movement on the repealing of the education freedom accounts? I mean, you mentioned that people are throwing that out there. I mean, either this session or in the longer term, but just wondering about longer term, like tax impact on local districts if this continues to grow as a program.
So, I mean, today, the bill that's in the Senate, that was introduced in the Senate to repeal education freedom accounts was what we call an expedient to legislating committee today. So although I voted against the ITL because I want an ought to pass motion, I was in the minority on that vote. So 3-2, which means that it will go to the Senate floor and be reported out, and I will, and Senator Khan will speak to it on the floor, but we'd have to be able to get those, the majority party would need to bring some votes over. And I think that it's highly unlikely. It's really interesting to me. And sadly, I think it's unlikely. It is very interesting to me that, and it should be to all of you, that this bill in the first place never passed on its own merits. It passed because it was tucked into a budget with divisive concepts, with the 24-week abortion ban, with some other items that really should fairly, I mean, although they had public hearings, they didn't see the light of day through the proper process. They were, tucked in procedurally and protected. So, I'm really sensitive to that because I think, it seems it's sneaky to me. I think it's each one as you go, but that is the situation that we're faced with. So I just want to read the fiscal impact. I'm interested to know what, in Lebanon, now I've looked at the initial scholarship. The scholarship organization is now providing reports on the Department of Education's website. So you can see what the different schools are that students are going to. We have 1,800 students that are statewide that are taking part in voucher programs and the education freedom accounts. What kind of impact have you felt in Lebanon? I haven't been able to break it down that far yet. Do you know? Because it's still new.
So my understanding, Sue, is that a family might decide to what they would call homeschool. So we would get the form to homeschool, but then wouldn't they then seek the voucher themselves if they were going to do that? Or wouldn't they unenroll and then perhaps go to a private school and we would know where they're going?
You should.
So I'm not quite sure. I don't have an answer to how many of them go and are seeking a voucher.
Yeah. So if they were already homeschooled, like in that 1,800 are also students that are already being homeschooled, that's a little bit harder to track because they were maybe not physically already present in the classrooms, but were going, being homeschooled. It's the easier ones are the children who are in school, one of your schools, and they are moving and taking that, say $4,000 with them where they go. And yes, they would have to, you would be made aware, and that money that's with them that normally comes to the school, the limited adequacy funding that we have is what travels with them where they go. So there's also, I think we all know there are additional costs. It's not, I always just round it at $4,000. It's not just that. There are other costs that you have. So what it costs to educate a child or a teenager, just to students in Lebanon, is certainly greater than that amount. So we know that in some communities it costs them $20,000, and then you pull the 4 out of that, and the rest is still left there. So your I don't know what that number is for Lebanon. I have a, a graph that shows me basically, right at this moment, what it is for the entire state and the averages, but, you are still having to pay for that. Plus you have to replace that funding that travels with the student. And so that's when you're going to know. So that's when you're going to know what it actually costs you. And it will, we have this fundamental argument between all of us, not over whether this impacts property taxes. And my position on this, based on my time as a city councilor and working with budgets, is let's just look at that $4,000. If that $4,000 is leaving with 20 students, okay, that's, the school lights still need to stay on. The buses are still driving. The teachers are still teaching. All of these things are still happening. So that's going to have to be made up somehow. And if the number grows, it's going to become even more of a threat to, to education funding. And that's why I am trying to shift I'm not trying to leave the EFA conversation. I placed my votes on that. But I want us to get back to just talking about education funding in general.
Yeah, go ahead, MJ.
Can I just ask a clarifying question though? When a student leaves the district currently, the reason why they don't necessarily automatically get that funding, they have to apply for it and meet certain income threshold currently as it's written, correct?
Right. I think it's 300% of the federal poverty level. So that's not all students are eligible for that funding. That's a great question. There have been movements to try to make it open to everybody, but that hasn't happened.
If I could just mention, there's been a couple rounds of hold harmless that have happened through COVID legislation and stuff. So I'm not sure that the fiscal impact could be measured quite yet, because the last couple of cycles we've gotten adjustments despite our free reduced lunch or our ADM. There's a whole chart you get from the DOE that this is what you should get, but this is what you're going to get, basically. So it's kind of squirrely times right now, I guess is what I'm saying. The business perspective.
Yep. So last year, I think it was Senate Bill 135, basically brought you in at the attendance numbers from, I always call it pre-pandemic. There's a bill that will do that again this year because we are still in that variable phase. I don't think we're really going to know what this looks like for at least another year.
Anything else for Senator Prentiss? Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
I will thank you for having me. And again, sorry, not there in person, but I will make it there in person, hopefully before the summer. And I'm going to get in my car and drive back to Lebanon.
Before you get in your car, please remember to give control of the meeting back to Joanne.
I think she already took it. Did you take it?
Okay, you've already.
I was able to do it. It's all good.
And I'll put my seatbelt on, okay? Good night.
Yeah, that
Great
too.
to see you all.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 8B, discussion and action. Approval to post Lebanon School Board, Lebanon Educator Association collective bargaining unit agreement that'll be voted on March 8th. Let me give you a little bit of background on that because I think we've only had just one very brief bit of correspondence that came in. There was a member of the public who requested to see the text of the LEA agreement that the voters are being asked to approve on March 8th. And the way things stand now, the text of the new teacher's contract is not made available to the public until after they have voted to approve it. And all the public sees on the ballot is the incremental cost for each of the years of the contract. That's what we read out at the deliberative session. And this person, for one anyway, was interested in seeing what's behind those costs. And since it's going to be released to the public anyway, it seemed to me that it was something that we ought to do. So we asked our two of our attorneys weighed in on this, as well as the attorney representing the LEA in negotiations. And the bottom line is there is no legal impediment for us to do that. It is not often done, but there's nothing to stop us from doing that. That's a real short sum up of the legal opinion on this. And so I felt that it was the most reasonable thing to do would to bring this to the board and have a positive vote up or down. Do we want the voters to see the contract that they're being asked to approve? And so that's why it's on the agenda. And so I guess in order to get the conversation started, is there a motion to release the text of the contract, which, by the way, the LEA has approved, LEA membership has approved, this board has approved. And so that's where things stand. Is there a motion to do that? Stephen?
Sure, I'd move that we release the text of the agreed upon contract to the public
Thank
in
you.
advance of the election.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Stephen, second by Lillian. Is there any discussion or questions about this? Stephen?
So in your conversations with our legal representation, while they said there was no impediment, did they have any advice that here are concerns about doing it, or they had no worries about that either?
As I recall, there weren't a lot of concerns. The
Right.
Karen Ladd, who's the NEA representative, mentioned that the voters should be reminded, that's my word, not her, that the voters are only voting on the fiscal part of it. And so there may be changes in it that the voters aren't voting on, even though it's all put together. But I would think from a community perspective, you'd want to know what's in the teacher's contract because you're voting to support that contract or not to. And that's why legal counsel said it has been done. You can do it, just best to have this vote. So it's in the minutes and then we can post it.
Yeah, that sums up. I was going to read out what the attorney said, but that really sums it up. Kristen?
Just a question, like where would it be? Like, where does it normally get released? And is it always, I mean, I've never noticed it after the vote. I mean, I'm sure it's been there,
You can
but,
go on the SAU website now and look at the current contract
okay.
that's there, and
Under business and then under human resources or one of those tabs.
Okay.
And usually it gets posted after the vote.
Yeah.
And so I would probably make it be more on the front page of it, under like news and post it there.
Mhm.
We've been asked to put a lot of buttons up and the feedback from Kate and the people who organize it is that more buttons can be more confusing to people. So I think we would want to try to put it up toward the top. And obviously for the one person who requested it, I would send the link directly to that person. So they're not searching around in the website.
Tammy?
I mean, although we've never done it, I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, I understand the request and I understand that we're only including the value on the warrant article, but the fact is that they would be approving a 3-year agreement. So the terms of that agreement should be aware to them before they vote. So, yeah.
I agree. I think transparency really demands it. That's my point of view.
Especially-
Why not?
Especially if there's no statutory prohibition, which is what the lawyers are saying. So, which would be the only thing that would stop us from doing that, I think, would be a statute that says it's prohibited. And if there isn't, then no. And I do think that if the recommendation was to remind the public that this is just a vote about the fiscal part, that should probably be an asterisk at the beginning when we post it, something available to people when they read it to remind them that that's the case, right? Because I don't think a lot of people even know that. So I think that would be helpful.
And it is by its nature tentative because should the voters vote it down,
Right.
then it would have to be renegotiated and that may change some of the terms, but That's what they're voting on now. MJ,
So just the technical formatting, are you proposing putting a clean copy of the tentative agreement or are you a redlined version of the tentative agreement? Just, I think a clean copy is better for the public, but it's also not going to necessarily outline where the differences were in the new contract versus the old.
I mean, personally, I don't, my concern about a red line copy is that it muddies the issue. I mean,
I think.
yeah, you have to look at what changed, what didn't change. I mean, by this time, we ought to have a clean copy that both the LEA and the board has seen. So why not? Any other comments? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor? Unanimous, 8-0. Discussion and action. We need board members to volunteer to participate on the Mount Lebanon School Assistant Principal Search Committee and the SAU 88 District Director of Equity, Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Search Committees.
The timing would be for the assistant principal, probably the end of February, beginning of March. The timing for equity, curriculum, instruction, and assessment would be March. I would anticipate that you would take a few, maybe an hour in advance to look through the applicants, so you have a sense of who's going to be coming forward. And I usually share the draft questions in advance so people can give feedback. And then we usually set a day aside in a snow day. And I schedule the number of applicants that we have. We're usually done before lunch or right after lunch. So I would book it as a day. And we meet at the SAU office.
And this will be scheduled for sometime after the election.
Well, the assistant principal one might be before the election.
Okay,
It closes, I believe, if Friday, February 20th exists, that's
Okay.
in my head. And then the director of equity and CIA would be after the vote.
I'm
I see what
asking
you're asking.
because we have one board member who is
Yeah.
sadly retiring.
I don't think we were in danger of that happening.
All right, well, let's do the assistant principal position first. Does anyone who has not done this before like to give up a day of your life to do this?
And if you need volunteers, I'll do
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And
It's
the,
kind of just one clarifying question. You said probably the end of February, right? Not during the February break?
Correct.
Right. That's fine.
Our teachers would have to be there. Our committees are usually around 12 people total.
and candidates for the District Director of Equity, Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Have we, so is that job been posted already?
Yes.
Okay, so and just to clarify, this is replacing the current director of
Position.
CIA position?
Mhm.
Okay, and the source of funding for that is going to be the same as the source of funding for the current position?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, I can volunteer to do that one.
Okay, well, you were just the board
I know.
observer on one of these committees. I'd like to give someone else a
That's fine.
chance.
If anybody can't, I just have free time during the day.
Okay, no, thank you.
I'd be interested.
Okay, sure, good, thank you. All right, thank you, Stephen and Jenica. Item 8D, discussion of COVID protocols. Where we had some correspondence suggesting that it might be time to give up our mask mandate. We've had other correspondence along the lines of keep the masks there. So I asked Joanne to put this on, just thinking that here we are, we're approaching February break. It might be a good idea just to have a general board discussion about how people feel about this, the current protocols, what your positions are. I know also is Mike or Ian on?
They are not, they were going to talk only about the,
Right, yeah,
Monday there.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm not necessarily asking for a vote here, but I think everyone is aware of of the current safeguards we have in place. Unless Joanne, you want to recap them quickly in terms of
certainly.
asking and so
Um,
forth?
Currently, staff and students are masking. We are trying to maintain physical distance as great as we can, particularly when masks are off and eating with each other. We're trying to separate out students. In some of the lower grades, they're still cohorting so that they're not mixing students. And hand sanitize, just like what I just did, hand sanitizing, hand washing frequently throughout the day. And also in some schools, the number of students in the bathroom at a particular time, because that's hard to monitor, they are doing that as well. I think the three big ones are masking, physical distance, hand washing, and hand sanitizing.
Are any comments or discussion from the board? Stephen?
So, I mean, I get that everyone is tired of masks. I'm tired of wearing it too. I mean, we're done with this, but I think we still are in the midst of a pandemic. Yes, numbers are trailing down, which is encouraging, but they're not gone yet. We still see somewhere between 4 and 10 cases a day in our school system. That's with these precautions. If we start letting our guard down now, I think that we're going to see those numbers climb. We're heading into February break. People will be getting together. You know, it'd be interesting to see what happens when we come back from February break, if we see spikes in numbers. And so, yes, I think we're getting to a point where we might be safe to get rid of masks, but I don't think we're there yet. And it might make sense to revisit this perhaps 3 or 4 weeks after we come back from February break.
So I disagree. I actually think we're overdue for removing our masking and distancing mandates in our schools. Vaccines are widely available. There's been no conclusive evidence that mandatory masks in schools affect community rates of transmission. Other states in our country, as we know, and many other countries have not had mandatory masks for the last 18 months. There are clear downsides for masks on kids, for those with speech delays, and frankly, for all students not being able to see their teachers' faces and their friends' faces and communicate clearly. Our kids have had to bear a large burden for the last 2 years, and they get one childhood. I would encourage us to remove these mandates. We owe it to them to give them back some normalcy.
So I disagree with Jenica. I agree with Steve. I think that, yes, we all want to get to normalcy, but I also feel like the virus does not care about that. And we're making decisions even now. Other states that are making decisions based on what has been happening with this particular variant that is happening. But we also have no control over what the next variant will be. So it feels like we need to proceed with an understanding of the risks that are entailed. And I think that, yes, there are definitely trade-offs, but I also feel like we have been able to avoid so many of the clusters that have happened at other schools because we've been strict with our mitigation strategies. And we have been able to avoid so much of the quarantine that's had to happen in other states and in other schools because we've been able to do this. And so in fact, we've allowed our students to stay in school much, much more than they would have otherwise. So I feel like we need to eventually, yes, of course, I think that that is true. I think we are moving to a point where we will need to do this. But even the most ambitious plans that people have for removing masking entirely, every time they give a plan, it says, but this is assuming that 100% of adults are vaccinated and 70% of children are vaccinated. And we don't know how many of our children are vaccinated. We have no way of knowing that for sure. We do know more or less how many of our adults are vaccinated in our school community, but that's not 100%. So we can't put we can't make assumptions based on things that don't exist. So I think we just have to be cautious.
But then how do we explain other schools, even before vaccines were available, were not mandating masks for their kids, and the sky has not fallen? Most European countries have not mandated masks and have kids in schools wear masks for 7 hours a day. And that was before vaccines. We know that even if you're vaccinated, you can catch and transmit the virus. I just don't see the evidence that masking in schools actually has an effect.
So there's been lots of evidence about this, and there's lots of studies about this, but it's whether you believe studies or don't believe studies. I mean, there is evidence on all sides for every interpretation of things. But I think that what we have seen in our district, which without studies, what we have seen is better results than other schools in our state. We don't want to compare to other states because all other states have been doing different things, but we've been seeing better results as far as clustered numbers go, and as far as contagion goes, I mean, as far as transmission goes. So I think we can use the evidence we have from our own state.
Does anyone else want to contribute to this conversation? Tammy?
Are there any other surrounding schools that don't require masks? Do you know?
I don't.
I don't know that.
I'm just curious more to a local level. I mean, what's the data between the two? I mean, if we have a close school that does not have masks compared to ours, I mean, with respect to clusters, numbers, all of that, if we had a
If we do
closer
like a
comparison.
local circle, my understanding as of today, Hanover masks, Plainfield Grantham masks, Lee mask, Mascoma masks. I think, yeah, but Hartford's different because they have a governor that's making statewide decisions, whereas we are local. And it was very clear in the governor's presentation today that it's going to continue on in that direction.
And is
So-
the city of Lebanon still, we still have a mask mandate there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Kristen?
I'll just jump in a little bit. I totally see Jenica's frustration and would love to get rid of them too. I'm a little bit more cautious at the moment. I absolutely agree that, whatever, I'll just throw out my personal opinion. I think everybody should get vaccinated. Children, it's been approved all the way down. I don't know what the youngest is, 5. No, below that, they've already approved the younger. No, anyway, then I misread. But but I have talked to a friend who works at one of the elementary schools who thinks that the vaccination rate in the elementary schools is not high. So that's, I think, the biggest problem is that, if we could get the families, younger families, to encourage more people to get vaccinated, then we could be in a better position. I am teaching right now at Dartmouth with a mask on. It's not fun. I can't learn my students' names because I can only see like this much of their face. So I totally get that it's hard, but I think it might be a little bit premature. I would love outdoor spaces to be a lot more free. I mean, that would be something I feel like, the playgrounds and, I've heard that even on the elementary playgrounds, kids are still wearing masks. I mean, there should be places where people can, get them off. So I'm a little bit on the fence. I'm in favor of kind of upholding it as long as the town of city of Leb still has a mask mandate. I mean, obviously we need to go along with that in any case, but yeah, to maybe talk to the other schools and think about a strategy moving forward for some loosening. But yeah, I don't know how things are going in the elementary levels, and that maybe is I noticed that most of the cases, there are high school cases, but there are many fewer than there are in the elementary schools. And so maybe that's really more the crucial area than the high school kids. Anyway.
Tammy?
Can I just ask you one? So I know you got an email to request the change for the basketball, and we couldn't put it on the agenda because it wasn't enough time.
Well, the letter just came in this
Yeah,
afternoon.
no,
and
I know. Me too.
I thought only fair, it had to be noticed.
Well,
Yeah.
that was why I was wondering, since, the COVID discussion is on the agenda. I mean, I don't know that we have enough input from Ian or Mike, and I wasn't sure if but is the request that during the playoffs, the basketball teams would like to not wear masks while they're on the court.
There is a parent who wrote this afternoon making that request.
And then, so we will discuss it at the next meeting?
We can put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I was reluctant to bring it up specifically because it hadn't been noticed. We need to let the public know we're going to be talking about this. And I didn't want to have the discussion without having Mike and Ian here to weigh in on it.
I mean, when I saw it, I wasn't sure if it could fall under this since COVID discussion. I mean, that is what it is.
Yeah, I mean-
But without the, but I really wouldn't know that I'd want it either. Okay.
Yeah, MJ.
So I guess I'm kind of torn. I mean, I see Jenica's point and I see Stephen's point, but I think I go with Kristen that I think we need to proceed with caution right now. I think that we're just starting to see a decline in numbers. We don't know if it's a sustained decline. We don't know where it's going to plateau. So I think it would be nice though to kind of revisit this issue and have a commitment to revisit it, especially maybe 2 weeks after February break, to kind of see where we're at, have Dr. Greer come and talk to us, what she's seeing in the local pediatric practices, where they're at. And then kind of in that presentation we received, draw kind of the line in the sand that, you know, at the end of March, maybe they're throwing it out there that we would switch to not having masks. And then that would give people enough time to get everybody vaccinated if they choose to, once they learn that masking could become optional at the school, to have their children receive the vaccination series. But I think at a certain point, you have to, you know, accept that people have decided if they're not going to vaccinate their children, they've decided it's an acceptable risk for their family to not vaccinate them. And we shouldn't necessarily penalize the children that went through the vaccination series and are still having to wear a mask. And, you know, a lot of development is being missed, I think, with the value of social and emotional cues that you can't get when someone is wearing a mask. And I think that we're kind of stunting some of our children's social development right now by continuously keeping them in a mask without kind of an end date. But I do think that we need to give parents the opportunity to seek out the vaccinations if they realize that suddenly their risk is going to go up because now the school will be unmasked.
Or not just unmasked, but optional masks, right? If kids and staff want to keep wearing masks, they can certainly do so. I'm just talking about removing the mandates for it.
Right, but I think that especially in the younger grades, you're going to then put a burden on staff because some parents are going to want their kids to be masked. And no matter how much you have your conversation with your younger kid to put the mask on, they're going to see their peers don't have it. And then it kind of puts the onus on the teacher to say, well, your mom said you need to wear a mask. And so that's another fear that I kind of have is going to happen.
But again, thousands of schools in our country have already been doing that and they've managed to deal with it, right?
And teachers have been burning out in record numbers for just these kinds of responsibilities that are being thrust on them. I mean, I agree. Thousands of schools are doing this, but I don't think that that's actually helping the teachers to teach. So if that's our goal, if we want to have a better school experience for our kids, we have to understand that we cannot put all of that responsibility back on the teachers, which is one of the reasons we made this in the first place, because it was going to be too hard to enforce partially because teachers can't do that because they have to be teaching.
But I think we need is time to focus on our kids now and make it the best for them. Okay.
I'm not saying that that we're not focusing on our kids. And I think to put it in those terms is understating what the issue is. We're not talking about people who focus on their children versus people who don't focus on their children. That's a disingenuous comparison.
No, I'm just saying in terms of the trade-offs in the schools, we look at other countries that haven't had kids in schools in masks and even before vaccines. Like, I feel like there's no reason why we can't do this. We can get on a plane and fly 3 hours and your kids can have field trips and lunch in the cafeteria and parents can come in and read books. Like, I feel like our kids deserve that too.
But to get on a plane, you have to wear a mask.
Okay, but then once they get off the plane, mask free.
All right, and that's going to be the last word. Right
Wait,
now.
no. I would like to introduce a motion. I'm going for broke guys.
Okay,
So, so my motion is that starting February 21st, 2022, face masks will be optional in the Lebanon School District for students and staff. This will also apply for co-curriculars and athletics.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Jenica, second by Tammy. One round of discussion. Everyone gets to speak once if you want to. Or has everything been said?
I haven't spoken and I have two things that I think we need to be thinking about.
Could you pull the microphone a little bit closer, Lisa? Thank you.
So I don't agree with doing it so early. I think that we need to do what MJ is talking about, where we give parents the opportunity to immunize their children if they know ahead of time. So we would need to give them a running start at doing that. But I do think that we have kind of hidden this mental health concern a great deal by focusing primarily on the physical health of our children. And I think that we have seen people in record numbers being taken to the ER for suicide watch. We have children who are anxious and needing to take antidepressants and all kinds of mental health fallout from this pandemic. And now we have children, little kids who can't decipher what's going on because kids have been wearing masks for so long that their development is actually being impaired. So I think that we need to balance both the concern that Jenica has and the concern that Stephen has with some kind of modulated and purposeful approach to slowly taking the masks away. But we also need to make sure that we don't have a new iteration of this virus. Sorry, it's making it. And so those are the things that I'm thinking about. And I think that if we just take the masks off, there's one thing that I feel like we haven't checked in on, and it's really important. And it has to do with teachers, and it has to do with staff, and it has to do with all of the collateral human beings that are making our schools run right now, that are barely holding on with their fingernails to do this work. And so it feels like we need to check in with them. We need to ask them, how does it feel to have children unmasked, coughing in your face or whatever, if you're teaching, and how does that affect your mental health? Because I think that we need to ask them what they're willing to do, because we depend on them to make our schools go. And our children matter, but the teachers matter as much as the children, because if we don't have them, and we don't have the bus drivers, and we don't have the people delivering food and all the other very important human beings that are helping to make our schools run, we don't have support for our children.
And I guess,
So that's all.
I guess my response would be that adults can protect themselves through vaccinations, through boosters, through face masks. Adults can protect themselves at this point in the pandemic. I think we owe it to our kids to give them a chance to take the face masks off if they want and be able to see other people's faces in school.
Without asking our teachers how they feel about it.
I think this is, just this week, we saw New Jersey, Massachusetts today is lifting statewide mask mandates in schools because people are starting to realize there's no good scientific case for them. We can either do it now or we can do it 3 months from now, but we're going to lose those 3 months of having kids see each other's faces. So I would prefer to do it now.
Tammy,
I appreciate your input and your motion. I don't think I'm quite there yet. I hope to be there soon, but probably not there yet.
anyone else who hasn't spoken yet?
Oh.
Kristen?
Sorry, I won't take long. I did
No, it's okay.
wonder, maybe, I kind of agree with MJ that we should maybe put it on our agenda for a certain school board meeting, and potentially, not to throw out more surveys, but I don't know if we want to ask parents or we want to ask teachers or the teachers unions if they have an opinion, because we took their opinions into account in the first place when we did the mask mandates. So, yeah, I just wondered if we wanted to gather some input before we discuss things.
Anyone else?
Just one more thing to say. And I agree with Lisa's point about mental health concerns. And I think that that is, and from teacher perspective, from children perspective, I think that is a huge concern. But I also feel like we need to understand that masks are not the only part of the pandemic that has affected our children's mental health. The wearing of masks is not the only part of the pandemic that has affected our children's mental health. So when we remove the masks, I don't think it's a question of whether, when we remove the masks, at some point, we are still going to have the mental health effects of this pandemic in our schools. And I think we need to be ready to deal with that. And to Lisa's other point, we also need to have metrics in place or thought about what happens if the next surge occurs, in the next variant is not Omicron, the next variant is Delta all over again. What happens next? And I think it's important for us not to feel like this is a linear one-way progression as well. Like we make a decision, we've made a decision, we never make another decision. I think it's going to continue to be a moving target. We just need to be prepared for that.
All right. Like Tammy and MJ, I'm not quite there yet either. I mean, we know that we have seen upticks in hospitalizations and in cases after each of the holiday breaks. No reason to expect that we're not going to see it now. I also feel that we need, whatever we do needs to be coordinated with the city of Lebanon, because if our mask expectations are different in and out of the schools, I think we're going to have, at the very least, some confusion. And so I would be very supportive of revisiting this issue. Perhaps sometime in March, late March, whenever it seems appropriate. We'll have a new board then, hopefully not too different from what we have now, but we can visit it again then. The only other point I would make is, I think the wishes and desires of teachers and staff are important. In fact, it's been so important to us that I think much of our response has been driven primarily by our concern for the safety of our staff, our teachers and staff. I mean, that's why we wound up in the hybrid system that, unfortunately now we realize was not a very good thing to do. But that wasn't for the kids. That was for the teachers and the other staff. So I don't think we have anything to regret about our actions not taking into account the welfare of teachers, and we'll continue to do that. But they've certainly haven't been unheard. Okay, let's take a vote. Jenica, would you read back your motion, please?
Yes, starting February 21st, 2022, face masks will be optional in the Lebanon School District for both students and staff. This will also apply for co-curriculars and athletics.
Thank you. And that was motion by Jenica, which seconded by Tammy. All in favor? Opposed? 7. So the vote is 7-1. The motion fails. Okay, moving on to any unfinished business. I don't think we have any unfinished business. At least it doesn't appear on the agenda. Leadership team update, superintendent update.
Following up on that, school health and safety matters, attending the DPH update meetings, positive cases to the community, which we are now doing via the dashboard link on Fridays when school is in session. Ongoing communication with Concentric ordering supplies, and communication with DHHS and DOE. You might remember after 5 days, the whole home test kit thing, that no longer is in place. We're highly recommending home tests and for students to test negative before they come back. We do have a few home tests if families don't have that. As far as the renovation projects, Marinese architects are in communication sometimes on a daily basis. And we just met to review the Davis-Bacon regulations. The bids should be coming in mid to late March for the Mount Leb project. And information for the high school Hanover Street renovation overview that includes a facilities history, timeline of facility renovation actions, and bond cost was collected. And a mailer was shared with FNF. So there will be the project design overview as part of the annual report that people receive. And then before the vote on March 8th, they'll get an individual mailer. So it's 2 different ways to get information out. I'm also working on a tab on our SAU website. We administered the equity survey, and there will be a report by Mr. Moano this spring. Committee work, FNF, PNN, I think we can go around with the board members and they can give their updates for the committees. I developed the script presentations and participated in deliberative session. I attended the joint city school task force meeting, communication with the city regarding plans for Seminary Hill. Also talked or communicated with Sean today. They are down 5 people to assist with snow plowing and sidewalks. So we just have to continue to support each other, trying to get the snow moved around. Multiple meetings on personnel matters, facilitated the SAU Office safety meeting. I met with Tim and Dana about upcoming facilities projects, met with Karen to discuss the out-of-district coordinator position. You might recall that Alan has put in for retirement, so that's a position that we'll be filling this spring. SALT meetings, including Megan Glynn, who's an attorney, who's going to do her last brief summary about Title IX. Monthly principals meetings with Hanover Street and the high school. We have posted the positions for searches, and job description for the Equity Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Director was reviewed by personnel and negotiations. So communication with legal counsel for preparation for the deliberative session, and also, as Richard mentioned today, the LEA posting. Meeting with the high school regarding student supports. I attended the LMS leadership meeting and conversations about math common assessments. Created a climate and culture survey for staff at the high school, the middle school, and Hanover Street. This survey will be administered after February break. And attended, we kind of had a small area meeting. And so we met on Tuesday and we discussed ways to look at staffing needs.
Any questions for the superintendent? With regard to at-home testing, I noticed that it is becoming more and more available. I was in Maple Fields yesterday, getting a cup of coffee, and they had a stack of test kits right next to the register, right next to the cigarettes, as it turned out. I'm not sure what that means.
How is staffing?
We have some staff members who unfortunately are very ill from COVID and are recovering. We have some Hanover Street School staff that just returned, which has made a huge difference for Jack, who was multiple human beings every day, and his staff, who I was able to witness. Just the teamwork was incredible to just keep everything going. And that's true in all of the schools. So I believe, as Stephen said, it'll be interesting to see after these 2 weeks, because it wasn't the week after break, it was like the 10 days plus. I heard today on the governor's conversation, Dr. Chan was part of it, that he kept mentioning the next 30 days. So I'm thinking that might be when they're rolling out the 0 to 5-year-old vaccination. I'm not 100% sure about that. But looking at hospitalizations at that time and looking at school vaccination rates, and they just said that for them, they were not putting forward anything regarding masking, but they're trying to find some mechanisms for people to be able to use to some kind of metric, and there's not just one. So our staff has just done an incredible job, and they continue to do so. When I'm in the schools, the students definitely seem happy and engaged in learning, and it's really good to see.
I have 2 questions. One about the when meeting with Karen to discuss the out-of-district coordinator position. I'm not sure what that is. What is that
I think
position?
it's currently called the inclusion specialist, and neither she or I know why that is. It's a person who is a special ed background who works with students who are transitioning from our school to out-of-district placements and back. And that's why we want to call it the out-of-district placement coordinator. It just seems like that better fits the title. I asked Karen to meet with Alan because he's been in the position for so long, to have his input on creating the job description. So we are up to date and ready to roll for that interview process.
Okay, and the related question, actually, the diversity, equity, and curriculum instruction and assessment job description, for just as a clarification procedural question, are those descriptions for senior administrative positions, are they just reviewed by PNN, or are they voted
Yes.
on by the full board? I mean, what's the procedure for that?
They're reviewed by PNN,
Okay,
and then they get posted along with the job description online.
okay,
And we
thank
just,
you.
yeah, we just talked about that with Xavier today, making sure that when we do have a job description, that when people open it up on School Spring, they can hop right on and see the job description.
Kristen.
Hi. I just wondered if you could give us a quick update on what's happening with the city and the Sem Hill School. I haven't heard anything in quite a while.
Yeah, they said that they had their architect's plans were getting in good shape, and we're scheduling a meeting to meet at the end of February to look through. At the actual joint task force meeting, I asked where they were getting funding, and they had no idea. So I think that's the most interesting part. And it could be because they wanted to see these plans and then determine how much things are going to cost. And then they'll have to seek funding, however they're going to do that. So that's where we are. There hasn't been a lot back and forth until after February break. It'd be interesting just to see what plans they have.
They proposed a timeline that would get a proposal to our negotiating committee sometime in the spring, looking forward to then some sort of board action soon enough in the summer or the fall, so that we could be in time for a warrant article requesting the public's permission for the next election cycle.
For next.
And yeah, and we agreed, we have to, I don't have that timeline with me. We can make that available, but it seemed reasonable. MJ?
Do we have any data at this point about vaccination status of our students from the 5 to 12 range? I know the onus is on the parent to self-report to the nurse. I didn't know if parents have been doing that, and we've been keeping any kind of track of that.
I made a note to ask our nurses if they feel like parents are giving that information, or if I should send another note out saying, please contact our nurse if your child has had full vaccinations, because that's the key. Now, that includes the booster. So we'd have to be clear about that they're fully vaccinated, because there was questions about that for a bit of time. Thank you.
Anything else? Move on to the business administrative report.
I included the report through January in the packet. Similar to last month, I don't have a lot of things to really focus on too much. I would say that the 91.6% is slightly better, a little bit more spent. I don't know how to say that. Than last year, it was 91.02. So we're ahead of last year, which I think is generally good. Last year, we ended up with an unexpended fund balance of about 1.2 million. So you can see, I think we're on a pretty good trajectory. Hopefully. There are some wages that are not encumbered that will more than likely be spent, at least $250,000 between spring coaches. We haven't paid, the winter coaches should be paid this week, so it doesn't show in this report, for example. So we have coaches' salaries for winter sports, and then coaches' salaries for spring sports. We have all the spring sports driving around that last year we went pretty local. All of our teams we played were pretty much in the Upper Valley. Now we're back to Division II, so we'll be up north and down south and all over the place. If you have kids in high school sports, you're used to them getting home at 11 o'clock. There are some wages that won't be spent though. I count at least probably $200,000 worth of wages between my business office, for example. I've been down one person all year. So there's $30,000 that's in the budget. I haven't been able to fill yet, going back to the personnel question. You know about the principal, custodians, we're still down custodians. We had a custodian give his notice this week. Nothing to do with COVID. They're just hard to keep. And we still have a vacancy there. So we will have some savings that are, I would say, not misbudgeted or not. Actually, it's just unfortunate they're not filled. We need bus drivers. So we're advertising every way we can think of for bus drivers. So just be aware that there are some salary savings that you will see, and that flows back to the taxpayers if it's not spent. There are some expenditures that now that deliberative session is over and I can focus on something besides the budget and the bonds and stuff. You know, I see across all objects and sub-objects, the object being supplies, sub-object being like a supply is a pencil, but a supply is also software and textbooks and stuff like that. So if you look at all the supplies, there's $500,000 not spent. So I need to look at what that is, how much will be spent. You know, for example, well, this is not a supply, but you know, the advanced threat protection that we talked about during the budget time is in the budget for this year. And Peter said, yeah, he'll be buying it in the spring. So that's money that's, you know, $50,000 that will be spent. So there's some things that I'm trying to get some visibility on over between now and you know, the end of March as to what are some big holes that are going to be spent or not. And then, as you know, we try to start wrapping up expenditures by spring break. And I don't know if you have any questions.
Questions for Tim?
Actually, I have a question for Joanne. I forgot to ask. I'm sorry. Before you sit down. We haven't gotten any COVID update letters since last week. Have we just not had any cases or?
No, as I wrote, we will only be using the dashboard on Fridays. The state doesn't collect the daily data anymore. They're moving to weekly. And so our nurses have also moved to weekly. And then I sent the link with the dashboard.
Okay.
And so if people have an interest, it'll be the number of positive cases per school, children first, / and then staff to the right.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
Any questions for Tim? Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
I have one quick question, which maybe is a dumb question. I don't know. But you have, you know, a line item for school board with, you know, pretty large budget. I'm just curious what is actually being spent under that school board budget? What?
You're getting a raise.
I'm getting a raise.
No, school board generally covers, you know, there's a little bit of salaries, district meeting, the district audit, legal fees for negotiations and stuff. There's a postage budget that's pretty small, but it's kind of like general stuff that's not business, not office operations related, I guess I'd say, you know. So legal fees is a big one, as is one I just mentioned that I already forgot. Oh, audit.
Okay.
That's, you know, we have a $34,000 budgeted for audit. So that's what that makes up.
Does that include like school board insurance or whatever that, I was reading about that the insurance of D&O kind of insurance for school board members? Is that
Against what?
Sorry. So some districts have insurance in case school board members are liable for something. There's like insurance on.
Well,
behalf
we
of
have
the school
liability
board.
insurance that covers any employee and school board members who are acting in, but I actually don't bill that to the school board.
Okay.
It's
Just
what I do with that is, you know, there's a liability insurance line across all the different functional areas, and I do PO that's got like 20 lines on it. But maybe I should make one for school boards so you can eat some of the cost.
Just wondering.
Just get blamed for spending money that we don't.
If anyone else, no one else has anything, I have a couple questions. on, man. So-
Richard, I won't tell you where I saw test kits. You said you saw them at the Maple Fields. I will tell you, I saw them at the liquor store. I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The liquor store is stocking them now, yeah. The balance remaining, 3.9 million, seems a
Yeah.
little ominous to me for this point of the year.
Well, like I
Would you
mentioned,
agree?
just be patient. It's coming down. Like I said, we're 91.6% spent, and last year was 91.02% spent. So we're doing, I know it looks high. And as I dig into this, I'm trying to give you some areas that you'll see come down rapidly. But I know at first glance, you're like, wow, it seems awfully high. But we should be in the ballpark as last year, which is not as good as we want to be.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, it's a COVID, another COVID year.
Yeah.
We also have the impact fees that hit.
Yeah,
right?
well, that'll be on the
On the
revenue
revenue
side.
side, yeah.
I was trying to remember before this briefing, because I forgot to look it up, but I don't think I've gotten notification of any big impact fees yet. But I'll double
Yeah.
check.
You know, you really won't unless it just, until the check shows up in the mail, right?
Yeah, I usually get an email like the day before saying you get a big
Yeah,
check, but
yeah.
yeah.
And it bothered me a little bit to hear you talking about big under expenditures in various supply items.
Yeah,
And, you know, those are non-labor benefit things which are fixed. And this is something I don't think you necessarily need to comment. I just wanted to observe that this is one of these things that we don't typically do much adjusting during our budget review for those because, you know, we say the principals know what the schools need. And when I hear about, or technology as well. And when I hear about that being underspent, I worry a little bit about that. And
It'd be good to look at over the summer,
Yeah.
like to just look at the different lines. And I don't know, I apologize, I wasn't here for that part. I would be curious, Tim, to know where does the COVID 25,000 that we put in each school?
yeah, that's
live?
actually what I was gonna say. So custodial supplies is 88,000 unspent, and there's $25,000 at each school that we put in. So you can see we've spent a little bit of that money. So,
Yeah.
and I'll get a breakout of that, like for the custodial supplies, for example, there's a lot of COVID supply of money that we
Mhm.
budgeted every year in case,
Mhm.
or at least last year and this year. So that's one example. Another one is athletic supplies is 44,000. You know, that's going to come down when we start lining fields and stuff in the spring. But that's a good question, Richard, and that's why I you know, for transparency, I wanted to bring it up because there's $96,000 in regular ed supplies. So what's going on?
Yeah.
Why is it so big so much
Yeah.
right now? And I don't mean it as accusatory. I just need to find out.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else for Tim? All right, thanks, Tim. Committee updates. Finance and Facilities met last Thursday. Aaron is not here.
Yep, but one thing we wanted to put in the minutes was that F&F approved Tim up to $15,000
Right.
for, can you give the language, Tim? It's as if there's unanticipated changes at a Mount Loud project.
Right. So a change of $15,000 or less, it might be an increase of $15,000, but a change that needs to happen pretty quickly to keep the project on track. So that the contractor would come to me and say, you know, the sewer pipe's in the wrong spot. That's an example. And I can approve that, and then I'll provide to F&F every month a list of what they might be, and it needs to be a small list. So the idea is that it's very small every month. There's not 20 of these things that's going to stress everybody out, including me.
The other thing that was discussed at Finance and Facilities, we talked a little bit about the track renovation project and the fundraising initiative that's still working at this point, still behind the scenes. And a request was made for, I think, up to $3,000 for miscellaneous expenses associated with that committee's work, and Finance and Facilities was okay with that. It's a small enough amount that it doesn't require a board vote, but we did want to make sure that everyone was aware of the fact that there may be some expenses for postage and printing and things like that will be reimbursed. Tim will work his magic and write some of those small checks, but we wanted the board to know about that. Policy Committee next meets February 24th. Education Committee next meets February 21st. Personnel and Negotiations met last Thursday.
It's the review of the job description.
Right. Where's Tammy? Right, and the purpose of that was was just to review the job description.
Yes.
Okay. Student Wellness Advisory Committee next meets on May the 4th. Harvard Area Career Technical Center next meets Tuesday, March 8th, Election Day. Area Committee is coming up a week after next, February 27th. After many years of holding those meetings in this room, we decided to travel and going to have the next meeting at Plainfield Elementary School. As Joanne mentioned, there was sort of a not a regular area meeting the other day. Let me just give you a rundown on that. At the last regular area meeting, the chairman of the Plainfield board suggested that there might be areas, things not covered by the area agreement that the school districts might be able to collaborate on. And he gave as an example some of the work that Plainfield is doing with Cornish to enable them to do some hires they wouldn't have been able to do because they can now have people split their time between multiple schools. And we just kicked around some of those ideas. The business administrators and the superintendents are going to think about this. And in principle, it seemed to us it's a good idea if we can avoid some expenditures. The point is, it's sometimes difficult to hire someone. The example was given, hire someone at a position at 0.4 FTE, and there may be positions such as languages or something like that, where we could share someone. There'd be scheduling difficulties and all this, but anyway, we agreed to talk about this further. Like, capture that okay, Joanne?
Yes. yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
City School Joint Task Force met Thursday during January 27th. I was there together with Jenica and Joanne, and we already talked about the Sem Hill discussion. And I think that was the only thing that directly impacted the school district that we, of immediate impact. Track Fundraising Subcommittee continues to meet. Next meeting is Tuesday, the 15th of February here.
Is that over break?
That's during break, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so we may have to meet somewhere else. Yeah, okay, I'll let Brooke know. You have to meet somewhere else.
Richard,
Yeah,
just for the fundraising, the track fundraising subcommittee,
yes.
is it up and running to the point where if someone wants to make a donation, there's someone to make contact?
Almost.
Okay.
Almost. No, we, one of the great things that's happened just in the last week, and we've been working with the Lebanon Parks and Recs, the Friends of Lebanon Parks and Recreation, because we needed a nonprofit entity to partner with. And they've agreed that we can work under their EIN as a number and use them as an umbrella nonprofit. There are still some details to be worked out, but we just got permission from them just yesterday, I think, to use that number for some grant applications that are going in. So I would say another, let me let the chair of that fundraising group know that there's someone who wants to spend money to make a donation. Yeah.
Right.
I would say very, very soon.
Great.
That's great news. Yeah.
It's not me, it's just.
Well, I said it was great news. I didn't say thank you, Stephen. Future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions.
I was thinking of asking Dr. Greer to attend the meeting if we meet on March 23rd to then bring up the conversation about masks.
Any objection?
Not gonna be
Let's
quick.
do it. Okay. Important dates and district announcements. The next school board meeting is Wednesday, February the 23rd. And then we have to set a date for the first meeting after that. What we have done is after the election, we have typically been meeting the Monday after the election as an organizational meeting to elect officers, things like that. Joanne gave me our policy on this, and we're not actually required to do that. What it says is that the board shall organize annually at its next regularly scheduled meeting following the school election. So what I wanted to propose is that we do the organizational meeting at that March 23rd meeting. If there's,
So we don't have a meeting on the 9th?
so we
No.
wouldn't have a meeting on the 9th in any event
Okay.
because the vote has not yet been certified.
Oh, okay.
We typically would meet the following Monday, which would be the 14th. But
I don't think that policy is that old. I think it's just a couple, like,
yeah, 2019,
yeah. And I think it was important to reread it because we haven't reread it in a while.
right. So I was going to propose that we do that. Unless people feel that we shouldn't go that long between board meetings, it would be, well, from February 23rd to March 23rd. Yeah,
So
MJ.
how would that impact the committee work though? Because if you're not meeting till the 23rd, are there any committee meetings that are scheduled to meet that wouldn't have assigned members?
We try to not have that.
There
And
are,
what the chair usually does is reaches out to what we think are going to be the new committee members and kind of ask where you might want to be. And then the organizational meeting, there's not a lot of agenda items on it. It's who's going to be the chair, vice chair, whatever.
yeah, and there's none. There's some in February. We just went through the list. There's some in February. The Hartford meeting is on election day. So I think we'll be good. I mean, we can, if something has to be done, like PNN or something like that, the existing committee can meet and, you know, we can tap someone to make up any, you know, to make a quorum.
Do we have one or two meetings in April? Because sometimes the meeting falls on the week off we have. So,
We would usually have one.
so we would have March 23rd and then not again until the third week of April, which seems like February 23rd, March 23rd, third week of April. I don't know. I could go either way, but it's reducing the frequency of meetings.
Yeah. Well, March would still,
Well, Lil mentioned maybe meeting the first Wednesday in April.
Or yeah, the first Wednesday in April, because March has 5 Wednesdays, you would still be 2 weeks away from the 23rd if you met on the 6th of April. And then you wouldn't meet again. You wouldn't meet again until the 27th of
and
April.
that would be the fourth Wednesday.
That would be the 4th regularly scheduled meeting.
That sounds like a good plan to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks.
What was that date again, Lil? April?
It's April 6th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, to do the meeting a week early, you mean? So we have two.
So we're not meeting during break, April
Yeah.
break.
I think we can do this by unanimous consent. I don't think we need to vote on it. So the next, let's just to make sure we get this straight. The next board meeting is February 23rd. Following that, the next board meeting in March would be March 23rd. We would then have 2 meetings in April, April the 6th and April the 27th.
6 and 14, right? 2 weeks. Oh, it's-
6th and 27th. The 14th is during break, right? So that would be the,
The 6th and the 27th.
oh, thank you.
just the 1st and the 4th instead of the 2nd and the 4th.
Okay. Hearing no objection, that's what we'll do. Is there any other business to be transacted? Okay, we need to go into non-public under C, please. Could we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to enter non-public under RSA 91 A32C.
Second, please.
I'll second. I'm not repeating
Second
it.
by Lillian. Roll call, please. Tammy?
Yes.
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 Can the minutes please have the time when you end on it? So because that will be the end of this actual meeting.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
we will record that. And we will have to come back to public session in order to adjourn this meeting. I don't know if the TV guys need to be here for that or not. We're going to go into non-public session. We'll probably be in there for a half hour or so.
If-
And then we're just going to come back here, say move to adjourn, and we're going to leave.
I think if a board member emails me the second time that you do it with the time, I can have Megan add it to her minutes. That the
Okay.
board came back after the non-public and then the board ended the meeting in the public.
Okay,
I will be happy to email you that.
so
Record.